February 26, 1597. A man was being dragged toward the capital, his wrist bound in rope. The soldiers escorting him were grim, frozen faces, and the people along the road stared as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing, because the name of the prisoner was Lee Sun-shin. 5 years earlier, when hundreds of Japanese ships appeared off the coast of Busan, this was the man who saved the nation. At Hansando, this was the man who destroyed 100 of Japan's elite warships in just 3 days. The man who made Toyotomi Hideyoshi himself give the order, "Never fight Lee Sun-shin." And now, that very man was being hauled off the prison as a criminal. What on earth had happened? Why was Lee Sun-shin thrown into the prison of the very country he had risked his life to protect? And while he was being dragged away out on the Korean seas, a disaster no one could have imagined was beginning to unfold. Today's story is the trial of a hero. You will remember this from last time. After the Battle of Hansando, Toyotomi Hideyoshi gave one order to his entire navy: a ban on naval combat. Never fight Lee Sun-shin. From Japan's side, it was a reasonable call. Every time they fought him, they got crushed. So hiding in port was simply the smarter move. But for Lee Sun-shin, this created a very strange problem. The enemy had started running away. Whenever Lee Sun-shin sailed out, the Japanese fleet would hide inside their harbors. And those harbors were narrow and shallow, terrible places to bring large warships into fight. Push in recklessly, and it's the Korean Navy that ends up in danger. So Lee Sun-shin played it carefully. If they come out, crush them. If they don't, block the choke point and wait. Never charge in and take losses, and for nothing. This was Lee Sun-shin's strategy. But the king back in the capital, King Seonjo, he saw it completely differently.
Why isn't he fighting? Why isn't he catching the enemy? Something's not right.
The annals of King Seonjo record his own words.
At first, Lee Sun-shin fought hard, but after that, he made no real effort to catch even the smallest enemy.
And never raised his troops to strike. So I always had my doubt about him. Those are the king's words. He says it himself, that he has always suspected Lee Sun-shin. Of course, Lee Sun-shin kept reporting his situation to the court.
The enemy won't come out. A reckless attack would be dangerous.
But the king wasn't listening, because in his mind, a picture had already formed.
He fought well at first, but now he's defying my orders. Is he trying to play king out there on the sea?
Suspicion began to settle into the way the king looked at Lee Sun-shin. And suspicion, once it starts, only grows. The king heard only what he wanted to hear and saw only what he wanted to see. Lee Sun-shin's report started sounding like excuses, and Lee Sun-shin's victory started fading into ancient history. Then one day, the event that would detonate the king's suspicion came flying in, from Japan. And it came straight from the mouth of a Japanese general. Early 1597. A tempting piece of intelligence reached the Korean court. At the time, two generals were leading the Japanese forces, Konishi Yuninaga and Kato Kiyomasa. They were on the same side, and yet they couldn't stand each other. They were practically enemies. Different personalities, different backgrounds, different values. Rivalhood wanted to each other dead since back in Japan. And this man Konishi leaked information to the Korean court, quietly, secretly.
Karo is about to set sail with his army. On that day, if the Korean Navy lies in wait at the choke point, you can take him down.
The moment King Seonjo heard this, he was practically jumping for joy. Because the court already knew about the feud between Konishi and Kato. Their rivalry was common knowledge. So the king thought,
Konishi wants Katagon, so he's handing us the intel. This is real.
and immediately he sent the order to Isun-shin.
Failed out. Destroy Kato's fleet.
So when this order reached Isun-shin's command base at Hansando, how did he react? Isun-shin didn't move. He received the direct royal order and he didn't sail. The reason was simple. Isun-shin didn't trust intelligence handed to him by the enemy. Think about it. Before Gonishi and Kato were rivals, they were both enemy generals in the middle of a war against Korea. Could anyone guarantee that intel was 100% true? What if it was a trap? Isun-shin knew exactly how hard the Japanese had been trying to lure him out, how many baits they thrown to drag him to a narrow strait or an ambush. This intel could be exactly that kind of bait. Sail the whole fleet out carelessly and find the main Japanese navy lying in an ambush, the Korean navy would be wiped out on the spot. He could not move the fleet that guarded all of the Korea seas on a single line of intel thrown to him by the enemies. So, Isun-shin was cautious. He sent scouts. He verified the intel. He analyzed the situation. But back in the capital, this was read completely differently. The king exploded,
The king commanded him to sail, and the subject refused.
and the king said this.
Even if he were to bring me Kara's hat right now, that crime can never be forgiven.
Even if he captured Carlos now, there's no forgiveness. What does that mean? It means the king had already decided to kill Isun-shin. Isun-shin eventually sensed the mood in the capital too. In the end, he decided to sail and began preparing his fleet. But it was already too late. By the time Isun-shin tried to move, the order for his arrest had already come down from the capital. February 26, 1597. Isun-shin was taken to the royal prison in the capital as a criminal. The charge, defying a royal command. Isun-shin was 53 years old. The man who, since the very eve of this war, had guarded Korea's seas without losing a single ship. The man who built the turtle ship, who unleashed the crane wing formation, who destroyed Japanese fleets 100 ships at a time, now strapped it to a torture frame in the royal prison. For a 53-year-old veteran general, the punishment was brutal. And yet, they say, Isun-shin never once made an excuse for himself. He didn't beg the king for forgiveness. He didn't blame anyone else. He simply endured every blow in silence. 28 days. For 28 days, Isun-shin was held and tortured in the prison. During that time, a handful of Korean officials fought desperately to save him. One in particular, a minister named Jung-tok, pleaded before the king.
Yi Sun-shin is a brilliant commander. Do not kill him. Give him another chance.
In the end, the king held off the execution. But it wasn't forgiveness. Isun-shin was released from prison, but he couldn't go back to the sea because another punishment was waiting for him. It was called 백의 종군, to serve in white, stripe of rank, marching with the army as a common soldier. In modern terms, you could call it being demoted and relieved of command. Remember, Isun-shin held the title of 삼도수군 통제사, commander of the navies of 3 provinces, the man in charge of most of the Korean coastline. All of that was stripped away, and he was sent to a region chosen by the state to serve under other men. Stripped of his rank overnight, the place Isun-shin had to repair to was Choge, in Hapcheon, far from the capital, deep in Gyeongsang province. There, he would serve under General Gwon-yul. Gwon-yul was, at the time, the supreme commander of all Korean forces. Lee Sun-shin had to enter as an ordinary soldier under Kwon Yu with no authority to command, no authority over anything. A 53-year-old veteran packed his things and headed for Gyeongsang province. And on that road to Choge, Lee Sun-shin would hear the cruelest news of his entire life. Lee Sun-shin had a mother. She was 83 years old. In Lee Sun-shin's life, his mother was someone beyond compare. He'd had two older brothers, both died young, and his father too had passed away early. His mother was the one family member he could lean on, and to her, he was the son she was proudest of. The bond between them was deep. Then the news reached her that her son had been thrown into prison. At the time, she was in Yeosu, far to the south. The capital was an impossibly long journey for an elderly woman, and not by land, by sea. But she made up her mind.
My son may die in that prison. If he does, I have to see him just one last time.
An 83-year-old mother boards a ship, heading from the far south toward the capital. A journey that might be her last, taken with her death already accepted. But when the ship reached Bopsongpo and dropped anchor for the night so she could rest, the anchor line slipped loose. The ship she was sleeping on drifted away, and there, on that ship, the 83-year-old mother passed away without ever seeing her son. This news reached Lee Sun-shin on the road to Choge, and Lee Sun-shin broke. In his war diary, the Nanjung Ilgi, there is this line.
The sky is black, and the sun seems to have lost its light.
But what broke him even more deeply came next. Lee Sun-shin was a criminal. He was solving a fight. And under Korean law, a criminal could not hold a funeral for his own parents. He could not bury his own mother, a mother who died on her way to see him. And even her final farewell, her son was not allowed to be part of. Lee Sun-shin wept over his mother's body, and then he had to stand back up and keep working toward Choge. His diary from this period is almost unbearable to read.
I wish I could die soon and follow my mother.
A 53-year-old veteran general writing in his diary that he wants to die. Lee Sun-shin was living through the darkest hours of his life in Choge, Hapcheon. And while he had lost his mother and was serving in white, out on the Korean seas, an even greater catastrophe was quietly drawing near. There's one more person we need to meet here. A man tied to Lee Sun-shin by a lifelong bad blood, Won-gyun. Won-gyun was 5 years older than Lee Sun-shin and had become a military officer far earlier. In short, he was Lee Sun-shin's senior. But when the war broke out, it was his junior, Lee Sun-shin, who became the hero. And when Lee Sun-shin was promoted to commander of the three provinces' navies, Won-gyun became the subordinate of his own junior. Won-gyun's envy and jealousy ran deeper and deeper, and he began feeding slander about Lee Sun-shin to the court in the capital.
Lee Sun-shin only hesitated. Lee Sun-shin won't fight the enemy. Lee Sun-shin is out there playing king on the sea.
And how did these words land in the ears of the king, who already suspected Lee Sun-shin? The king began to trust Won-gyun. There's a record of just how much the king believed in and favored him.
He is a man who does not fear even death, for the sake of his country.
The post Lee Sun-shin left behind, commander of the three provinces' navies, naturally went to Won-gyun. And the moment Won-gyun took that seat, the king issued an order.
Attack the Japanese forces stationed at Busan.
Now, this was the exact order Isun-shin had refused to the very end. But Won-gyun sailed. He took the entire Korean fleet, all 160-some Panoksan warships, with him. Where Won-gyun headed was Chilcheonryang, the narrow, dangerous stretch of sea beside Gose Island. And on July 16, 1597, here the worst defeat the Korean Navy would suffer in all 7 years of the war took place, the Battle of Chilcheonryang. This time, the Japanese Navy did not run. They lifted Toyotomi Hideyoshi's old band on naval combat because the man in front of them was not Isun-shin. In a narrow sea, at night, by surprise, the Japanese Navy completely encircled the Korean fleet and shattered it. Of more than 160 Korean Panoksan, only 12 survived. The entire Korean Navy that Isun-shin had spent 5 years building was almost wiped out in a single day. Won-gyun too was killed in this battle, and the Korean seas that Isun-shin had guarded with his life. Every bit of control over the southern sea passed that day into the hands of the Japanese Navy. When this news reached Isun-shin in Choge, how did he react? Hiwa's diary records it like it. I could not hold back my weeping. The fleet he raised, the men he trained, the sea he protected, all of it collapsed the moment it left his hands. And the king, back in the capital, how did he respond to this disaster? When the news of Chilcheonryang reached the capital, the Korean court fell into panic. The navy was gone, the sea was wide open. Now the Japanese Navy could roam the southern seas at will and send up the endless stream of supply ships. The entire peninsula was thrown back into crisis. And the king finally realized what he had done. The man he had imprisoned, tortured, and cast out into service in white was the one man who had been holding this country together. The king had only one option left: reinstate Isun-shin. A month after Chilcheonryang, a royal envoy arrived in Choge. Isun-shin is reappointed as commander of the 3 provinces' navies. Now, if you were Isun-shin, what do you feel in this moment? The king who suspected me, imprisoned me, tortured me, and wouldn't even let me bury my mother now calls me back? Wouldn't you have every right to be furious? But Isun-shin accepted appointment without a single word of complaint. According to the record, he simply, silently took up the post of commander again. He returned to his place, but returning to his place meant returning to almost nothing. The records say that when he came back, the men under his command numbered 9 officers and 6 soldiers. 15 men total, and not a single ship. The supreme commander of the Korean Navy standing on a ragged shoreline with 15 men. And right there, Isun-shin started over. He sought out fleeing civilians and persuaded them to join. He gathered his scattered soldiers and scrapped together weapons. Then one day, truly welcome news arrived.
We have ships. 12 of them are left.
And do you know where these 12 ships came from? They were the ships that fled the Battle of Chilcheonryang. When Won-gyun was being crushed, some commanders pulled their ships back and retreated. What looked like cowardice at the time became, ironically, the last hope for rebuilding the Korean Navy. And when word spread that Isun-shin had returned, the commanders who'd fled Chilcheonryang began coming back, one by one, with their men. A single name Isun-shin was pulling the Korean Navy back together. Right at this moment, another letter arrived from the capital. A letter from the king.
Navy is too weak. abandon the sea to win the army and fight under General Guan Yu.
In other words, give up the sea. And Lee Sun-shin wrote a reply that would become one of the most famous lines in all of Korean history.
Your servant still has 12 ships. If you fight with everything we have, we can still turn this. And so long as I am not that, the enemy will never dare to look down on us.
It gives you chills every time you read it. Now, there's something you must misunderstand here. Lee Sun-shin didn't say this out of overconfidence. He knew that stopping hundreds of Japanese ships with 12 was almost impossible. So, why did he say it? Because he knew this. If he gave up the sea here, the Japanese supply line would flow up endlessly, and Korea would truly be finished. This wasn't confidence, it was desperation.
The moment we hand over the sea, Korea is finished. So even with 12 ships, we have to hoard it.
That was the true heart behind that letter. September 14, 1597. Lee Sun-shin had anchored his fleet at Byeokpajeon of Jindo Island when a lookout came running with an urgent report.
The Japanese Navy has entered Rampul.
How large was the fleet? More than 300 ships. 300. What Lee Sun-shin had, counting one ship that had just joined, was 13. 300 against 13. By any rational measure, this is not a battle. So what did Lee Sun-shin do? He suddenly moved his fleet from Byeokpajeon to the Jeolla Right Naval Base in Haenam. Why move? Because there's a specific place he had his eye on. In Chinese characters, Myeongyang, in our language, 울돌목. It means the sea that rolls as it turns. A sea that whips as it turns. What kind of place is Myeongyang? A narrow strait where the sweater rushing through it accelerates to a terrifying speed, and with countless reefs below, when those currents collide, they spin into whirlpools. Here was Lee Sun-shin's calculation.
If I block this narrow place, then no matter how many enemy ships there are, only so many can come through at once.
300 ships may try to enter, but they can't all come at once. However many come through, that's how many we destroy. 13 ships holding a narrow choke point. This was the last strategy Lee Sun-shin could devise. On the eve of the battle, Lee Sun-shin gathered his commanders together and he said this.
There is no more place to live, and nowhere left to retreat. Do not cling to your lives. He who seeks to live will surely die. He who is ready to die will live.
This was not an order. This was a promise to die together. I too will die. So fight. With your death already accepted. Can you imagine how the faces of those commanders must have changed, hearing those words? Dawn, September 16, 1597. Through the narrow strait of Myeongyang, the Japanese fleet was pouring in endlessly. 300 ships. The horizon went black with the flags of Japanese ships. And on the other side, just 13 Korean ships. Lee Sun-shin stood on the deck of his flagship, looking out at the side. And then he gave the order.
All forces advance.
The fate of Korea hung on those few words. For the king who had imprisoned him. For the country that wouldn't even let him bury his mother. To take back the seat that the man who slandered him had lost. 53 years old, Lee Sun-shin takes 13 ships and sails toward 300. Next time, I will show you his most famous battle, the one battle every Korean knows by heart. How 13 ships held back 300. How the current of Ulurmuk swept the Japanese fleet away. The hero's greatest story, stay with me for it.